So regulatory issues, really should the data be filed at all? That was one of our key issues, but we realized if we didn't file the data, the availability of this drug would likely go down and at some point may not be available for anyone. We undertook what's called a rolling NDA, and I'll explain that later if there's interest. However, most importantly, we had to commit to what we call post-approval commitment studies. In other words, we had to continue to follow these patients for survival. We had to move towards less heavily pretreated patients. We also had to move towards a randomized study, which still has not been done as of today, and to work closely with cooperative groups, not only in the US, but also in Europe. And lastly, there were a number of corporate issues that we had to address. Just really the resource intensity of putting this together was just immense. It is not something I would say one person can do. It really would take a whole team of people to be able to meet the needs of what it would take to get approval for any drug, whether it's in pediatrics or in adult oncology. So these are really the ongoing studies right now. Most of you are familiar with some of the combination studies that have been conducted. And again, these are all studies within the hematologic malignancies. There's been 2 solid tumor studies been conducted, none in pediatrics. There's one study ongoing at the University of Minnesota where patients with neuroblastoma are eligible for this study, but that study is really just getting underway. And just lastly, is there a better way? I couldn't help but at least touch on some personalized medicine strategies with clofarabine with any drug. And again, this study was conducted in Europe where 14 patients were enrolled, 4 had CRs, 10 did not respond. But what came out of this, though, was 17 genes were shown to be upregulated in the responders only. And again, but this was a small study with small numbers of patients. Some of the studies that you might be familiar with regards to 0523 is also looking at gene profiles in these patients at the time of study entry and at relapse. So in conclusion, really getting a new agent approved, particularly for a small indication, is a challenge. I have to underline, I think there's got to be a need and a focus on getting that approved. Most of the agents we use in pediatrics are already approved for use in adults, so they're going to be available to us. In this case, there's no adult label. In other words, the only approval for this drug is for children with cancer. If that wasn't available, again, would this drug be available coming in the future? I don't really know. So this drug, though, was approved on response rate, durability of response. Transplant played a big role, which could still also impact on patients with neuroblastoma. And the ODAC was a tremendous undertaking. But I would say even for neuroblastoma, if you present a drug application to the FDA for approval, very likely that will go to an ODAC committee as well, mostly because of the small niche indication, the small size, patient numbers. It will likely go to an advisory committee for their input on it before they would grant approval.